Okay, so I wrote strategic business reporting about a month ago, and I wanted to share 3 things that I wish I knew before going into that exam hall, because honestly, that was one of the most difficult ACCA papers I've ever written. So this is not going to be a deep dive into the specific course material, but rather I'm going to give you guys my opinion from me actually going in and writing the test for the first time to what you should do, what you should study, and then also how you should approach it. So for those of you who are new, I'm Conrad and I'm an ACCA student at the strategic professional level, and I am nearly done with ACCA. And on this channel, I share tips, strategies, tools, everything you need in order to pass ACCA. SBR is essentially testing your knowledge about the accounting standards, and that is IAS and then also IFRS standards. Now in the exam, there's essentially 3 things that stood out to me. The first one being the recognition criteria for all the standards. Now just quickly to break up the standards for you guys, essentially it is always the definition, the recognition requirements, initial measurement, subsequent measurement, and then also disclosure. So that's essentially how a standard is broken up, guys. Now it is important that you guys know how an asset is recognized, for example, how an associate is recognized, all the criteria that essentially to see if something is an asset, a liability. Obviously I'm oversimplifying it now, but your current assets, your fixed assets, all of those recognition requirements are really important. Secondly, guys, the definition is also really important. I noticed that, but not just the definition. As you guys know that within a definition, you need to know more and more words and the definition of those words. For example, an asset, the economic resource controlled by the entity as a result of past events. You need to know what controlled means. You need to know what an economic resource is. You need to know what essentially as a result of past events. So you need to break down all of the definitions, write them down, break them up into words. Obviously, the different IFRS standards already show you how to do this, and it's basically common knowledge already. But that is a very important thing when you're going into SBR. Lastly is the disclosure. And guys, I don't know if this goes like past, well, this is against conventional knowledge, or this is not really, but remember, this is my opinion. They didn't really ask the disclosure too much, surprisingly, in the exam. And that was weird for me because essentially I come from a background of going to university, and I remember like in my last year of university, my 3rd year, we specifically had to disclose specific items, especially things like investment property and assets. You had to know what the disclosure was about, essentially the nature, the timing, and the amount of whatever happened in that period, just to disclose to the stakeholders. Just become a standards enthusiast. Just understand how they plug into each other, because sometimes they ask case studies where multiple standards are required. Then you need to know about, listen, income taxes. How does that fit into deferred taxes? How does that fit into current assets? How does it fit into a sale of an asset, a sale of a subsidiary, a sale from an associate to a subsidiary? You need to understand essentially how these different standards intertwine and like fit in. And that's relatively important that I noticed in the exam. Okay, point number 2. If you just focus on doing this, you guys will be ahead of like 60%, 70% of other students. Now, there are essentially 3 things within this that are important. The first one being, make sure you adopt the approach of, I'm explaining to a stakeholder that doesn't understand specifically what's happening in the situation. So always try and explain something like you would to your father or your mother, and essentially take these concepts, because the higher you go, I've noticed with accounting, the more you're trying to explain to other stakeholders what's happening in the business and trying to make it understandable. Because remember, the financial statements are there to help the end users, the primary users of the financial statements, to make investment decisions, to give you credit or loans, whatever. So it has to be understandable to other people. Therefore, take an external stakeholder approach when answering your questions. Always think, would grandma understand this? Whatever the case may be, Second most important thing, guys, and I can't stress this enough, make sure that you structure your answers correctly. This means use a spreadsheet only when a spreadsheet is needed. Don't type in your long answers, your long essays like an idiot into the spreadsheets, guys. Okay, type it into the word processor. So make sure that you understand that the spreadsheet's there for a specific reason, and the word processor which is obviously the thing underneath the spreadsheet, is there for you to type your longer answers. Also with this, guys, remember to reference your answers in your word processor to your spreadsheet always. I use an ABC or a 1A, 1B, 1C type of reference, or C calculation number 2A, and then you essentially just reference, because remember, you need to make it as easy as possible for the marker to award you more and more marks.
An apple a day might get me an A.
Lastly, within this, guys, quantity over quality. That essentially means if you do as many questions as you can, right? I'm going to give you guys a benchmark in a second of how many questions you should do. But if you do as many questions as you possibly can, like work through questions, whatever the source may be. I prefer longer type of questions, like usually we used to call them section C type of questions. So work through those questions, do as many of them as you can. Even if you have to look at the answers while you're busy doing it, you're still learning and seeing how does this examiner want me to structure this answer. So guys, my benchmark for you, right, if you want to pass this like the first time, if you do 150 questions and you have proof of this, I promise you, you will definitely pass. That's not even a doubt in my head. Literally, if there's one thing that you take away that I wish I did more often, did more of, was do more questions. I wish I did more questions, but I know I'm going to pass, so I don't have to stress too much. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what I would focus on if I went into this exam again. Remember, this is my opinion, guys. It differs, obviously. I'm not an examiner or I'm not an expert. This is just my opinion. Number one is definitely groups. And by groups, I mean learn the acquisitions, learn the different types that you get. So associate, investment in a subsidiary, and all of those different, what happens if you sell shares or you sell equity or whatever the case may be. Just make sure that you understand how those things work, guys, because that was one of the questions that I struggled with a bit, but I actually went through it a lot before the exam because I knew that, listen, this is new knowledge. They usually test you on new knowledge, and just focus on this, guys. I can't stress it enough. Secondly is financial instruments, and this is where I aced it. Like, I was so happy when I saw this. I know financial instruments flipping like the backside of my hand. That's an Afrikaans saying. That's how well I know it. Like, literally, I know it so well. So financial instruments, just make sure you study that. And then lastly, make sure you understand how taxes play a role in all of this. So deferred tax, with deferred tax assets, deferred tax liabilities, all of those specific tax rules, current tax. Just understand how it fits into everything, because everything is intertwined. Just think of it as a web, right? Everything is intertwined. So those are the three things that I would focus on if I had to go into this exam again. So if you're looking for a learning provider that will actually help you through SBR, guys, you are in luck. I did a review of LearnSignal. This is literally like the best platform that you can use. I actually had a meeting with one of the founders. It was very cool. His name is Johnny. And I had a chat with him. He's a very cool guy. But if you guys would like to watch that video, I'm going to link it up here. Definitely look into it, guys. I really recommend it. Definitely one of the better platforms out there. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.